My name is Randall Eggert. This class is Grammar and Stylistics. It's about writing clearly.
First and second person pronouns in research papers. I'll begin by posing some questions about the use of first and second person pronouns in research papers. So first of all, is using the first person in a research paper okay? And if so, what about the singular, that is using I? And what about the plural, that is using we? What about using the second person? Is that okay? And is it specifically okay to use the referential second person, that is using you to refer to the reader? And is it okay to use the generic second person, that is using that you that doesn't refer to any specific person, but to any person? Well, to answer these questions, I'm going to give some examples from published works. So we'll begin with one from Ollinger, 2011. I first situate this study in the literature on stance identity and the study of writing as activity. Then I show how my methods shape the data I chose to collect, as well as the identification of interactional phenomena. Next, I analyze a discussion during collaborative group work in which writers react to the suggestion that a particular word, discourse, be included in their paper, and I turn to writers' reflections on this incident. By analyzing stance taking during group work and interviews, I aim to shed light on the construction of discoursal identities. So notice that in this passage from Ollinger's paper, the subject of just about every sentence is I. In that same paper, she writes, however, we can go even further. In addition to indexing different producers, language users, and/or contexts of production and use, discourse indexes different audiences, the group members themselves and the teacher reading their essay in the future. So here we see we. This is what linguists call an inclusive we. This we includes the writer, but it also includes the audience, the readers. So that's why it's considered inclusive. Here's another example from Molino 2010 of an inclusive we. On the other hand, if we consider the function of making claims and elaborating an argument, this use is slightly less frequent in the English corpus, a total of 3.9 occurrences per 10,000 versus 4.0 occurrences in Italian. Okay, so here we see that we showing up again. This is meant to include the audience. This is a device that writers use to engage their audiences. It's sort of a way of making the audience feel like they are part of the argument. I've heard some students complain that it may be a bit presumptive on the writer's part, but I also find that it works, that it does engage audiences. This is an example of what linguists refer to as exclusive we, where the audience is excluded. It's a plural first person, but not including any second persons. So this is Myhill, Jones, and Watson, 2013. By focusing our attention upon this aspect of teaching subject knowledge, it is not our intention to suggest that there is a crisis of competence within the profession. Rather, we wish to draw attention to the continuing professional development needs which are a consequence of changing policy mandates in the language curriculum. So here that we and our is referring to the three authors, Myhill, Jones, and Watson, not to the audience. Thus it's called an exclusive we. And then there's this one that I'm going to call an all-inclusive we. That's not actually a technical term, but what I mean is that it includes the speaker or the writer, it includes the reader, but it also includes any other people who might be interested in this topic. So the passage is from McGee, 2014. The paragraph and paragraphing are poorly understood phenomena. This is not to say that they have not been in research, but there is no current academic, as opposed to pedagogic, book-length treatment of the paragraph and paragraphing. and we are yet to possess a comprehensive theory of paragraphing. So it's not we as in me and you, but we as a community of scholars who are interested in paragraphing. This is yet another sort of approach that writers use. And you can see how in different places in a research paper, a writer might choose to use I, might choose to use inclusive, we. If it's a plurality of writers, it may be the exclusive we. And sometimes the writer might choose to use the all-inclusive we. So getting back to our question, is first person okay in a research paper? What about singular? Well, we've already answered that. But I'm going to say yes, depending. Because the truth is there are some disciplines, some academic disciplines that discourage the use of first person in a research paper. So for example, I've worked with engineering students, and they tell me it's practically unheard of to use first person singular in a engineering research paper. That the only people who can get away with that are people who are really, really established in their field. So let's go with the other question. What about plural? Well, the answer to this as well is yes, depending. And again, in a discipline like engineering, you likewise wouldn't use we. That just using first person is discouraged altogether. And I could imagine that there may be some disciplines where we is more acceptable than I, or even vice versa. Part of being a good writer is knowing what the conventions within the genre that you're writing are. So you have to know what the conventions are, and you have to navigate that. So if you're writing in engineering, don't use first person. If you're writing in linguistics, yeah, it's perfectly fine. Not everybody does, but lots of them do. What I would say is judge by the writing that you are reading. So the research papers that you're reading, see what they do, and then model yourself after them. All right, now we're going to move on to second person. We'll start with second person referential, where the you refers to the reader. So this is taken from Pinker in 1994. How many words do you think an average person knows? If you are like most writers who have offered an opinion based on the number of words they hear or read, you might guess. And here the you is quite clearly meant to be the person reading his book. This is also taken from the same book. This is now a generic you, where it's not referring to the reader specifically, but to anybody. If you were to cut up a tape of someone saying cat, you would not get pieces that sounded like k, a, and t. Okay, now, judging from those two examples, you might think that my answer is going to be yes to the two questions. You'd be wrong. So the question is, second person okay in a research paper? Referential? No. Generic? No. The thing is that those examples I took from Pinker's book are not from a research paper. That book was intended for a broad audience. It wasn't meant to be an academic research-based book or genre or paper or anything like that. And the truth is that for whatever reason, and this just simply seems to be an arbitrary convention of the genre, in a secondary research paper, we just don't include you. And if you do, in papers that you hand in that are meant to be research papers, it's going to feel to the audience like you're writing a how-to paper, not a research paper. So be careful with that. Just avoid it. And again, that's part of knowing the genre, and part of the genre of a research paper is second person is just simply avoided. And I maybe even should be more specific than that and just say you is avoided, because I do sometimes see imperatives which contain tacit second persons, but the actual word you just seems to be avoided in research papers.